INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu is promising that INEC will make rigging difficult for politicians and election riggers ahead of the 2023 elections based on innovations and efforts by the Commission in the electoral process. And the former governor of Ekiti State, Ayafayoshe, says Atiku Abubakar is not against Governor Wike as the internal wranglings in the party continues. Hello everyone, welcome to the program. It's Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbale in Abuja. Let's get started, everyone, tonight by continuing on our countdown over the strike action by university lecturers. One thing that has kept the students away from the classrooms across the different federal universities in the country. It's now almost 210 days since the lecturers have down to and away from the classrooms, and the negotiations between the federal government and the lecturers continue. And Nigerians are looking forward to the stakeholders getting their acts together to resolve what has become a national embarrassment. Now, if you are one of those like me, expecting that 2023 should be a year that Nigerians will take their destinies in their hands and determine for themselves the right leaders or the leader, in the case of the presidency, that will take the nation across the Rubicon and help the nation forge ahead and progress, then it's important that we have this conversation. What kind of leaders do we need? What are the criteria for picking the right leaders? Will INEC be able to rise up to the occasion? Can we say this time around that no politicians can boast and say, don't worry, we will rig this election? Are elections now difficult for politicians or those election riggers to rig elections? Now, first and foremost, our first part of this program will be dissecting the kind of leaders that Nigerians need, and perhaps the kind of burden or the expectations on the load on the head of the next president of Nigeria. But before we get into those conversations, let's check out some of the political roundup stories.
President Muhammadu Buhari says crude oil theft must be addressed and has promised that his administration will work assiduously to reverse the trend. He made the statement during the inauguration of the Presidential Committee on National Economy, which he inaugurated in his office earlier today. Acknowledging the impact of the menace on the nation's revenue exchange, the president reminded his audience that production of crude oil, owing to economic sabotage, has led to a production decline at half the nation's OPEC quota. Governor Dave Umahi of Ebonyi State says although he is a party man and wished that his party APC wins the presidential elections come 2023, but if God says no, then the presidency should go to the south. He stated this today after a private meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari in his office.
I'm not wishing P to be away. God has the final say, and he has the power. He gives it to whomever he wishes.
The People's Democratic Party in Kogi State is the latest to react to online video of the state governor, Yahaya Bello, allegedly inferring death threats. The Kogi State PDP is asking the federal government to place the governor on security watch. The Kogi State chairman of the PDP, Mr. Sam Wotu, told journalists at a news conference in Abuja that the governor incited his supporters in the video to unleash violence on the opposition party in the state. The PDP is also asking the Inspector General of Police to investigate the video and other activities of the governor with a view to prosecuting him at the end of his tenure.
The PDP therefore calls on President Muhammad Buhari with the highest sense of humility to immediately call Governor Yahaya Bello to order.
Ahead of the 2023 general elections, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in partnership with civil society organization John Bali, supported by USAID, is educating the general public on peaceful elections in Yobe State. The executive director, John Usman, told journalists in Damaturu that the aim of the sensitization was to propagate peaceful and credible 2023 general elections by assisting the participants to identify causes of electoral violence and how to mitigate it. A federal high court sitting in Calabar has adjourned hearing in the 2023 governorship candidacy of the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, in Cross River State. Senator John Eno is challenging the emergence of Senator Basi Otu as the party's candidate during the party's primaries, which produced Senator Basi as the party's governorship candidate in the 2023 governorship election. At the hearing at the Federal High Court sitting in Calabar, counsel to Eno, Mr. Awa Kalu, SAN, prayed the court that Otu be disqualified. Meanwhile, counsel to Otu, Mr. Mike Ezekome, SAN, notes that his client was properly screened and has the academic qualification to contest for the governorship position in the state. The number of Labour Party supporters in Plateau State is increasing by the day as they continue to take advantage of every opportunity to register to be full-fledged members of the party. At the commissioning of the Wazobia Youth Movement State Office and inauguration of the leadership of the Wazobia Support Group, over 200 youths of different faiths and ethnic backgrounds thronged the party registration point to register and get their membership cards ahead of the 2023 general elections. Speaking to the teaming supporters, the deputy chairman of Labour Party in Plateau State, Comrade Mike Audu, says Peter Obi is a tsunami sweeping through the whole country and that Nigerians should not be discouraged as the right time has come.
Peter Obi is not a political issue. Peter Obi is a tsunami movement.
Before we get started with our guest tonight on the program, let's tell you that Governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, continue with his commissioning of projects in Rivers. Today, one of his guests is a former governor of Ekiti State, Governor Ayodele Fayose, who says the rift between Governor Wike and Mr. Atiku Abubakar could be blamed on those around the PDP presidential candidate. Take a listen to Mr. Fayose.
Majority of your enemies today are not against you because of anything. They are against you because they know you have capacity. They are against you because they know where you take over, they will fall apart. For me, before I come to the commissioning, I want to believe that His Excellency Atiku Abubakar is not against you. But let me say this quickly. A lot of people surrounding the throne are enemies of the throne. A lot of people surrounding the throne have one axe to grind with somebody or some issues with somebody, and they take it to where they are not supposed to take it. There's no living being in this party and outside this party that will not acknowledge your contribution to this party.
All right, then that's not our focus tonight. Our focus is about Nigeria, about the future of our democracy, and choosing the right leaders. And so tonight, no doubt, the expectations of Nigerians are high about the 2023 elections. Who should be the next president? What if the person does not understand the enormity of what is at stake when he gets into office? Should we be electing someone who doesn't have the capacity? How do you determine capacity? How do you differentiate between popularity and quality? Well, these are a lot of issues that can be confusing the average person. But tonight, let's get some perspective from an elder statesman, the founder of ANAP Foundation and the founder of Stanbic IBTC, Mr. Atedo Peterside. He joins us virtually from Lagos Island in Lagos State. Thank you so much, Mr. Peterside, for joining us tonight. It's good to see you. Just like a lot of Nigerians, you have high hopes about 2023. But something is fundamental. How tedious or how would you describe the burden of that office? For anyone, it looks very juicy and it looks like a very good office that anyone can aspire to be. But how easy would that chair be at the moment for anyone who is eyeing it?
I think we want somebody who will stand for the truth and bring truth to that office. It has been lacking there for a long time. The truth is that the bulk of the problems confounding Nigeria are pretty obvious. Everybody knows the problems. Everybody knows about banditry, terrorism, crude oil theft, unaffordable, federal government, cost of governance, petrol subsidy which we cannot afford, and the low business confidence caused by a variety of things, including foreign direct investors withdrawing from Nigeria. Those are things that somebody studying O-level can understand. So it's not something that you need phenomenal knowledge to understand the problems. Interestingly also, the bulk of the solutions are pretty straightforward. The first thing they call for is sincerity. The second thing is courage. And those two things have been lacking for a long time. So I don't take this view that you need a sort of Nobel Prize winner to find a way around simple things like a petrol subsidy that we cannot afford or things like that. Everybody knows the problems. And the solutions are simple.
All right. There's something that you wrote online on your page on Twitter, which really I think is a very deep statement if you dissect it carefully. You said the first year of a serious presidency, commencing 29th of May 2023, might be about blood, sweat, and tears and not happiness. I'd like to, first and foremost, I'd like you to break that down for us before I get into the other part of that statement. What did you mean by that?
What I mean by that, and I'll tell you the whole truth, see, this government has kicked the can down the road. There were many obvious things they were supposed to do. They dragged their feet for a long time, and now they're postponing some of them until the middle of next year, which is the same as saying they don't want to face the problems. So therefore, whoever is coming in May 2023 has to begin by clearing the mess that should have been tackled, last year before, and so on. So therefore, I will be very worried if somebody coming in next year in May doesn't understand that he has to do all the dirty work which this government has refused to do.
But I mean, by these dirty works, what exactly do you mean precisely?
Okay, let me give an example. Sheryl, I think go and check the estimates from this same government. The bill for the petrol subsidy next year will exceed the total revenue of the federal government. So imagine that you're running your household and the bill for one item, what you are going to spend on one item, like petrol, is more than your entire income, your entire revenue. Does that make any sense? What further evidence do you need to know that you cannot afford something? Now, let me explain. It was not always like this. What we had was petrol subsidy that potentially was growing, rising and rising every year. And then we had revenue that was growing slowly. But we were always going to get to the point sooner or later with high oil prices where the petrol subsidies were going to grow so large that they would overtake the entire revenue. And what is the plan to solve the problem? Having finished the entire revenue plus more on petrol subsidy, we then plan to go borrowing. And what is the meaning of borrowing? Increasing the money supply, largely printing more money. The more money you print, the more you increase the money supply, the more you send the exchange rate. It's almost a perfect correlation. if the money supply right now is 2 trillion, and you print more through debts and increase it to double that, then all other things just being equal, you expect the exchange rate to double. So the point I'm making is that we have a monetary and exchange rate crisis that is caused, at the root of it is the fiscal indiscipline. So whoever comes in May next year, the first thing you must do is go to the roots of the fiscal indiscipline to cut out the things we cannot afford. So it's going to begin with bad news. And this is the first time I've seen elections where at least one of the candidates has mentioned already, even on live TV, that they have to cut out some things that we cannot afford, the biggest ones. In the past, people were shying away from saying such things, but I think it's becoming clear now that Nigerians have understood those who have lied to them in the past. Look, we're in the age of social media. Go back and play back videos of what people, public figures, have said before on all these contentious subjects. Hear what they said 8 years ago, hear what they said 4 years ago. You can then see that sometimes the reason we cannot do the correct thing is that the people in charge have been lying to us 8 years ago, 4 years ago, so they are trapped by the lies. The second reason why they are trapped is that invariably there are some people, powerful people, benefiting from every distortion. So sometimes they're in bed with those powerful people who benefit from the distortion. Look, the petrol subsidy is lucrative business. Whoever brings in the petrol through NNPC and all that stuff is making a fortune. It's always been the case.
Now, one of the things that you also said, that statement, that one single sentence or statement you made is very pregnant with a lot of meanings. So to manage the expectations of Nigerians, from, if I deduce some of the things that I can take away from what you've said so far, is that Nigerians should not be too will I say, over-expectant of anyone who wins the election in 2023, because from what you have explained, you said the first year will be a lot of blood, sweat, and pains. And you also said that the gain will come after the initial pain. So it means that in the first year, the leader, whoever it is, may not be popular because Nigerians will go through some excruciating pain. How easy could that be in terms of communicating this to Nigerians?
Okay, the sound was breaking. I couldn't hear you.
Okay, so let me just summarize quickly on what I was asking. You mentioned in part of the statement that the gain will come after the initial pain. That means the next leader in the first year may be unpopular because of decisions, the reality on ground. But how easy would that be to communicate this kind of scenario to Nigerians?
Yes, you see, when there are governments all over the world, even Nigeria in the past, when you know that what you have to do is to bring back bad news. This is not the first time that Nigerian governments have reduced the petrol subsidy drastically. This won't be the first time that Nigerian government has tackled things like cost of governance, trying to cut out things we can't afford. But the problem is, in the past has been that people thought they could get away with it. I think now, slowly, everybody has realized that the only people who are fooling ourselves. So we are now at the point where I even think that, especially when we have an electorate that is now full of younger people, the younger ones are the majority. From what they've been writing, what they have been saying, they understand the issues. They understand that some people are taking this country for a ride. So the point I'm making is that I don't think the way forward again is for anybody to attempt to come and tell obvious lies to Nigerians. All of us will scream and say, not again. We have been down that road before. We've heard people come and say the foreign exchange will become 1-to-1. We've heard people say all kinds of things. We've heard people say that the exchange rate to $1, to $200 was too high. So I think we're now in the mood of saying, you cannot fool us twice, 3 times, 4 times. And the thing that has changed, the fundamental that as opposed to in 2023, the young will clearly be politically active, very interested. In fact, they cannot even wait for the elections. I think that is, you see, sometimes you can create a monster beyond your control. And it's a good thing for this country that many young people aged 18 to 34, 35 are now very interested in the political destiny of this country. And they will set the agenda between now and the elections in February.
You are also very precise in what needs to be done, because beyond these challenges and managing the expectations of Nigerians, because a lot of Nigerians out there, especially those who are very active online, have this feeling that once we elect the right leader in 2023, our problems are solved almost immediately. Our challenges will disappear, but it doesn't work like that. The reality is that it's going to be excruciating, it's going to be painful, and we need to bear it. Now, you said an incoming federal government must address insecurity and economic management head on. How can they do this? How would they be able to do it? With what resources?
You see, take insecurity. There are many countries around the world that have faced insecurity. They have been truthful, honest, sincere. They have even sought help and have been getting help from advanced countries. People are willing to help you to fight terrorism. The truth is that the body language of the Nigerian government has not been encouraging. People hide under all kinds of, sentiments and excuses about sovereignty and so on. Please excuse me, what sovereignty? What sovereignty is involved in getting assistance, even if it's a foreign government to help you, get lots of drones, attack bandits, attack terrorists, fight a high-tech war. Why do you want to use an AK-47 to fight an AK-47? The whole logic of government is that you should have superior firepower. And in the 21st century, that superior firepower should involve high-tech solutions. You want to dazzle your enemy by applying weapon systems that are beyond him to respond to. What we are doing is doing more of the same every day. And then we arrest people. Eventually we catch them, we detain them, we put them in prison. They break out and they go back to square one. So once we have a leader who is serious to tackle these things and to make it very clear that there's zero tolerance, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are from in this country, zero tolerance. That's the first thing we need. Don't ask, please, let me make it very clear. I'm not saying that our armed forces are not trying. I'm not saying that we don't have patriotic people who have risked their lives, who are in the trenches in the Northeast, who are in the trenches in the Northwest, who are all over the place doing their best. I'm saying that they have been let down by their leaders. They should have been put in a position where they had far superior firepower, so that even the bandits will run out of Nigeria. So too will the terrorists. Take Chad next door. It's not a rich country. Please go and check Shell. Does Boko Haram dare to go inside Chad and operate freely? They know each time they cross the border and go into Chad, they will be wiped out. So they prefer to make sure they're always on the Nigerian side, where different rules apply. So please, we have some good military people. They need first class backing at the top, making this a national priority, getting assistance from any serious country in the world that wants to help us. Scientific, high-tech solutions, superior firepower. That is the language that people who want to carry out violence understand.
All right, Mr. Peterside, you don't look like someone who has not decided yet about who to vote for in 2023. But let's help out some of those, I'm excluding myself, who has not voted in a long time because I'm always on duty. I'm far away from my polling unit. But let's give some perspectives to those who have not made up their minds and who are still thinking of whether this candidate or that candidate, what qualities should I be looking at in who becomes Nigeria's next president. First and foremost, I'd like to ask you, do you suppose that there could be a surprise in the sense that perhaps a less popular or an unexpected candidate could emerge Nigeria's next president?
Look, my foundation and our foundation, we've always been involved in opinion polls since 2011. Let me tell you the number one surprise that we already know. It has been published in the papers. I've seen all the reports. Let me just give you some data, Shem. In 2011, PDP was the ruling party. Before the elections in 2011, from our opinion polls, PDP, the ruling party, and President Goodluck Jonathan had a 54% approval rating from Nigerians. 2 months ago, similar opinion polls carried out show that 40% of Nigerians don't approve of APC or PDP. 40% of Nigerians don't want to hear about APC or PDP. They believe they have both failed. So all of a sudden we find that those who don't want APC and PDP appear to be in the majority. Now that is just in terms of approval rating, because the approval rating of both APC and PDP from those polls that were published was very low. You understand me? So I'm saying that something has changed, and that's the reality. If it hadn't, we would be in the old environment where the ruling party would always be the favorites. I'm making is I think everybody knows that they have to walk their socks off. There's nobody that's going to sit on their oars believing that things are the same as before. First of all, why should anything be the same as before? Go and look at the data for 100 million Nigerians in poverty. Look at the unemployed youth, the millions. Some of these numbers between 2015 and now, the rise in unemployment is frightening. I don't even know how people can afford to eat when they have no income and then inflation is galloping at 19%. So the point I'm making to you is that you get to a point where things are so bad that the only thing left on the horizon, the only thing that people are looking forward to is to if not to pull the house down, to change the rules and go for a different kind of solution. And that is why many young people appear to be excited about the elections. And please let me make it very clear. People have been saying all kinds of things that they only make noise on Twitter. Look at the Osun election. The turnout was high by recent standards. Why was it high? Because of high interest level. And the youth participated actively.
Now,
at the end of the day, the ruling party fell flat on its face.
I mean, a way to wrap up this conversation is what I would like you to tell Nigerians tonight. What or who is the kind of leader ideal for Nigeria in 2023?
Sorry, can you please repeat your question?
I was asking the qualities, or what is the ideal, or who is the ideal person to lead Nigeria in 2023?
Okay, you know, qualities, first of all, to be Nigerian president as of this day and age, given where we are coming from, I think the candidate must have a very high energy level. You see, sometimes you might think that, oh, they killed some people in Maiduguri, they killed people in Katsina. So what should we do about it? Nothing. But let me tell you one thing, in serious countries, as soon as there's a major incident, a president arrives, he comforts people, he's on the scene, he's visiting hospitals. So over and above those kinds of things, you want to see somebody who has the capacity, somebody who definitely understands all the problems. And I've said earlier, these problems are not difficult to understand. Everybody understands them. You also want somebody who doesn't even mind becoming unpopular. What is the worst thing that can happen to an incoming president? Assuming you go out there and tackle all the problems head on, even if you become unpopular. So what's the worst that will probably happen to you? That after 4 years, they won't re-elect you? Is it not better to go out there for 4 years, step on everyone's toes, cross all those who are holding back the country, put the country on the right trajectory, and if need be, fail to get re-elected 4 years later. That kind of person would be a hero. That's the kind of person we're looking for. We don't want these people that come in there on the first day, waste time, hang around doing nothing, loafing about, and then planning for re-election thereafter. As soon as presidents start planning for re-election, immediately they've lost the plot in this country. We want people who will come in, hit the ground running, tackle all the problems at the risk of being unpopular, at the risk of being voted out. That's the kind of change we're looking for. Thank you.
Mr. Atedo Peterside, indeed, some very interesting conversation. I have some other angles that we'll explore, but it's not good to drain you just at once. It's good to get you back at some point later when perhaps we're moving closer to the campaigns and the election. All of this is needed just to prepare the minds of the voters, just to make the right decisions. Thank you indeed, Mr. Atedo Peterside, founder of ANA Foundation, founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, Shem.
I appreciate that.
God bless you.
Amen. We'll take a break, everyone. And when we return, we will dissect just how the 2023 election will look like. Now, some say, gone were those days when someone would boast and say, I will rig the election. Can anyone say that again? Why? What we're looking at is ensuring free and fair 2023 poll. Mr. Osaze Uzi will be joining us, and Mr. Jide Ojo, both of them, will be breaking things down for us ahead of the 2023 election. So we need everyone will be right back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. You remember that there was a time that, in fact, an elected president had said, the election that brought me into office was a fraudulent one. In fact, there was a time that before you leave, people will be on the queue voting, an election result will be announced. There was a time in this country that people can boast and say, we will install you, even if your name is not on the ballot, but don't worry, I'll put you into office. It was that bad. Elections in this country was a very bad one some times ago. But recently, it does look like things are changing. Well, to that extent, the INEC that we have today is saying that there is an update about the conduct and how the processes that are being put in place. Interesting aspects to these past elections that we have seen in Osun and Ekiti was the introduction of the electronic result, election result analysis dashboard, where Yaga Africa and Channels Television partnered in bringing result real-time to Nigerians from the IREV portal of INEC, making it difficult. If you were rigging election anywhere, you know that the results are always, anyways, are being on live television. So it's becoming more and more difficult for those election riggers who, after voting, will go into the collation center, snatch the ballot, and rewrite the election result. Things are changing. And so in 2023, what will change? INEC chairman was at that event earlier today in Abuja at the Transcorp EOTing, where Young Africa presented the report on the election result analysis dashboard. Let's take a listen to the INEC chairman, who says there is no room for incident forms any longer.
We started thinking about how to beat this incident form matter, and we did it in two ways. First, we introduced the facial, that if your fingerprint doesn't work, there is also the facial biometric. And the only way the two can fail, particularly the facial, is where the voter forgets his face at home and comes to the polling unit without a face. But secondly, we also got the National Assembly to amend the law to make electronic accreditation of voters mandatory. If the fingerprint fails and the facial fails, the voter can't vote. And so you have a situation where there will be no incident form in the elections. And that's why some people are so interested in the beavers for all the negative reasons, because they know the role of the beavers in that respect.
There are a few more sound bites from the INEC chairman, which will trigger and inspire conversation. Let me introduce the panel tonight. Mr. Osaze Uzi, Oluwole Osaze Uzi, was a former director of voter education with INEC. Thank you so much indeed for coming tonight. And in fact, let me say that he's a senior, one of senior lawyers in this country. And Mr. Jide Ojo is a columnist and a political analyst. Thank you so much, Mr. Ojo, for coming. Now, I was laying a background about the history of elections in the country, from the days of FEDECO to FEC to INEC and all of that. And even in recent past, from 1998 up until 2007, those were days that you say they were the dark ages in election development in Nigeria. But Mr. Uzi, the Electoral Act 2022, how much of a circle is it giving to election in Nigeria, and what hopes do you think it holds for a 2023 election?
Thank you. The determinants of credible election rests a great deal on the legal framework. And while a good legal framework does not guarantee credible elections, if you don't have a good legal framework, you know that the elections are not likely to be credible. So the starting point is, what is the legal framework that you have? And a legal framework that gives you certain basic guarantees ensures that the people who go to the polls, their votes will be counted, and results will get some fidelity to what the people said. Then once those guarantees are there, you know that the elections are bound to be credible. And so the 2022 Electoral Act is a marked improvement on previous electoral acts. And it's also a byproduct of a lot of the shortcomings we saw on the field, which were exploited by the political class in doing what they did. For example, in 2015, the card reader was introduced and was used, but people were not happy that the way the Supreme Court handled the issue of the validity of the use of the card reader. Of course, the Supreme Court was right in the general scheme of things. They look, if you want that, it's a good technological device, it's a good thing, it will improve the process, but you must go and put it in the law. The courts don't make laws. The legislature has the constitutional responsibility of making laws. So whatever you want in the law, put in the law, we, the courts, will interpret the thing. So learning from that, for example, went back and said, look, let us go and put card reader in thing. I remember the discussions between INEC and the National Assembly. So please don't use card reader. Technology is dynamic. Today is card reader. In fact, by the time the law was being considered, INEC had moved ahead away from card reader to the
ZPAD.
ZPAD in between. And just to show you how organic the thing is.
Yeah.
The ZPAD didn't last too long, but we now saw a better thing. And who knows, maybe in 2 years' time or 1 year's time, there might even be better devices. I don't know, but...
In fact, today, the INEC chairman at that event was saying the developers, I'm interested, this is a good news, that the developers of that device were Nigerians. They were not Indians, they were not Americans. They were, although it was coupled outside of the country. Yes. But it's the fact that it was put together, it was innovated in Nigeria. And also, he said they wanted to go as far as using body odors of individuals to determine, after using their fingerprints, their biometrics, their facial recognition. In fact, they wanted to add the body odor to be distinct, so that nobody can steal anybody's identity, because identity theft is one major step in rigging election.
It's real.
So, I mean, let me ask, before I go to Mr. Ojo, would you say that election is now difficult to rig in Nigeria?
Election rigging, as we used to know it, is extremely difficult. But that is not to rule out rigging completely. But with the way this system is, INEC is one step ahead of the election riggers, those engaged in malpractices. But there are other forms of rigging which technology may not, for example, voter inducement, which technology itself might not immediately address.
Capture, yeah.
It might not immediately capture. But going forward, there are other ways that might be checkmated. But yes, it's extremely difficult to rig in the formal sense. But with the deployment of technology, there are also issues of cybersecurity and other things that they those who intend to subvert the process might start thinking about. But fortunately, I am aware that INEC is way ahead in terms of that, countermanding them.
I'll ask Mr. Ojo the same question. For you, you watch what happened, because there was something that was happening when we were live in Ekiti, for example. And there were those who were saying, they're already rigging in our polling, but we said, oh, the result is already with us. Yeah, no matter what they have, I mean, the ones in INEC portal is one that stands. How difficult do you think, or how easy is it to rig election in this country now?
Okay, now it will be challenging for the political class, but don't also underrate the ingenuity of the special breed of political class that we have. And what my elder here failed to mention, or what I would take as a rider to what he said, is that INEC alone cannot guarantee credible election. There are 9 stakeholders that are involved in the electoral process who needs to work in sync for there to be credible, free, fair, inclusive, participatory election. And I'll quickly run through them, even though time may not permit us to go into the role of each and every one of them. He talked about the electoral law. Who implements the electoral law? Largely is the electoral management body. But what about security agents? What role? Are they going to be complicit, or are they going to be professional? He alluded to the issue of voter inducement. Is it INEC that will run after those who are engaged in voter inducement, or is it the security agencies? How ready are they to give the support? What about the courts? Many cases are in courts, making INEC's work difficult. You see the controversy over Yobe North, who is the candidate, who is not the candidate, in Akwa Ibom, in Ebonyi, and all of that. INEC cannot descend into the fray. But campaigns are about to start. INEC has left those places blank because the court has not made the final pronouncement. So the court has a role, security agencies has a role, the media that sets the agenda. Who are the people peddling or who aid in peddling of fake news, hate speech, and all manner of misinformation and disinformation? The media has a role to play there, even though majority of this could be on the social media. But we also know the partisan nature of the Nigerian media, given the ownership structure. Then you look at the civil society organization. You look at the electorate themselves, who are pliable, who are ready to be induced, or who will even ask you for inducement for them to vote. A party is saying, we know they give shishi. Fine, you know they give shishi, but let's see whether on the field, if you don't give shishi, whether you win. So I'm not saying that is the ideal, but I'm saying, given the cultural nuance of Nigeria's electorate, and what played out in Osun, what played out in Ekiti, you know, what played out in Anambra.
We had an argument in the studio, in our election studio, where 2 parties were arguing who paid the highest or who paid more. It wasn't a case of we did not pay. It was a case of who paid more. So, I mean, like Mr. Ozazewuzi said, that voter inducement, I mean, vote buying looks like you're selling tomatoes and onions, but it's inducement in the real sense.
Section 121, Section 127 of the Electoral is very clear. It's both the giver and the taker that are complicit. And the punishment goes to the two. But, okay, let's run quickly. Apart from the electorate, the National Assembly that makes the law, you know the vigilance, civil society, and the media have to put to ensure that those salient provisions that we are celebrating today even made it into the law. Today, there are provisions that could have helped further to give credible elections that are in the Constitution, which has not seen the light of the day. How many months to the election? So there are 9 different stakeholders who needs to work in sync with the electoral management body at the apex, and with their support, then things will move very swiftly, then we can backslap and say, yes, we delivered. But if you leave INEC alone, or INEC as my elder will call it, if you leave INEC to do the job and all the other stakeholders stand aloof and did not give the kind of, look at what Yaga Africa is doing, the kind of investment, even from development sector, the development partners, we call them, the USAIDs of this world, the European Unions of this world, the UK of this world. If we do away with their support, what Yaga is doing, what IFA is doing, what Albino Foundation is doing, many of them would be a drain on their individual purses.
There's this aspect that I'd like us to touch on. So we're looking at how we can make it better, the 2023 election. A lot of people, Mr. Osazewuzi, I remember that when elections are over, votings are over, we usually bring him to the studio and say, look, it is not yet over, because the critical, in fact, politicians at the time wait for when it is getting late. That is when they act. That is when their own jobs really begin. And they go after the result, they push the result papers into the water.
And they are very critical. In fact, I forgot to mention that they are even more critical after INEC. You have the political party and the candidates coming in descending order. Once you pick INEC, you pick political parties, you pick candidates, and then you go down the lane with the electorate at the very back. So this 8th line have to work together
to ensure. I want to listen to what Professor Yakubu said. I'd like to get Mr. Osazuzi's comment on what he said. This part is about the beavers and going forward in our elections.
Perhaps the most important technological tool introduced by the Commission in recent times is the bimodal voter accreditation system, the BVAS, and the INEC result viewing portal, the IREV. While the BVAS is a device, the IREV is a web portal. But they have worked together to strengthen results collation and tremendously increase public confidence in the quality of elections in Nigeria. The smart carried the accredited voters using the fingerprint. And then they argued that, oh, if it doesn't work, no voter should be disenfranchised. Why don't you introduce something else? The commission had to bend over backwards to introduce the incident form. And so people started voting using identity theft. Because the machine will read any card configured to any polling unit. But it can't read the biometrics for as long as the person who presents the card is not the actual owner.
All right. Musa Uze, what is the gap that we need to look out for? From what INEC chairman has said, the BVAS is there, the IREV is there. But what other gaps do we need to look out for and work against ahead of the election?
I don't think for this purpose, in terms of accreditation and voting, there are any serious gaps, quite honestly. Because if you are not recognized by the BVAS, either through your fingerprints or through facial recognition, then you will not be allowed to vote. And that may sound worrisome to some people and say, how we sure the technology will work. But I understand the BVAS has about 99.9% accuracy. And it's a higher percentage when you think that it is the second. That's why it's bimodal. There are two types. First of all, your fingerprints, which then used to have about 97% accuracy. And then now you have this that has over 99%. So between both, it's highly, highly unlikely that anybody whose name appears on the register will not have the opportunity to vote.
Because what people usually do is that they buy people's PVCs.
Yes.
They take it off them, give them money, and they use it on election day. So this might be difficult.
Well, there are two ways. They can use them on election day, or they can, prior to now, but almost impossible. You cannot use them because you must be authenticated. The BVAS records each person who comes for accreditation, and it must be the actual owner of the card. And this data is transmitted. This data is there because, and don't forget that the Electoral Act has now redefined or designated overvoting, and it will depend on the total number of people who were accredited by BVAS, not by the indiscriminate ticking on the register. So electronically, that is there, and I'm aware that that figure will be transmitted. So people, the INEC will know that. So the returning officer will see this, and so that if the total number of ballot papers used for the election exceeds the total number of people accredited, and there are no incident forms, as it says, then there's a problem. That
you can't manufacture.
That's nullified.
Yeah. So, and one of the other areas is that people announce result under duress. That has been laid to rest because the court actually blamed INEC. You can't withhold people's certificate of return because of this reason, but it's now clear in the Electoral Act that any result announced under duress, INEC has the prerogative to review the situation and make a decision. Also, the Electoral Act is now very clear that you must paste the result on the wall. Yeah. And this is very important, isn't it?
They are very important. And first of all, the old act says, look, once a result has been declared, the only way of challenging it is to go and file an election petition. It's very clear. And INEC said, well, we don't have to give you a certificate of return. And at least 2 senators from Imo, specifically in that one, now used different methods to get in there. And INEC withheld their certificates, but they went to court and said, look, it's strict interpretation of what the law says. It's a different thing that it's not desirable, but that's what the law says. So that has been amended. So the INEC now has a right where it's under duress or where it's in contrary to the INEC regulations and the Electoral Act. And if, for example, if you forge a certificate and bribed the returning officer to make a return where it shouldn't have, because prior to now, the returning officer's decision was final. End of matter.
Let me tell you, your own view on this.
Well, yes, it's a welcome development again, considering the fact that this is an electoral law that was well fought for. I think a lot is expected of INEC to live up to expectation as the lead agency in the conduct of this election. But a number of things I would say the Commission needs to strengthen. Recently, there are controversies about what mode of transmission would the election follows. Section 50 sub 2 of the Electoral 2022 actually leave that discretion to INEC to deploy whatever solution they want to use at the discretion of the Commission. But, issue of manual collation and electronic transmission, many people hasn't even observed that, that the law still allows INEC to do manual collation. You don't just send polling unit results and tabulate, The stages of collation still remains as it used to be, from polling units to ward level, from ward level to local government level, from local government to state, and from state to the final in the presidential election. What needs to be done majorly now is the public enlightenment about the salient provision of this electoral act, so that all of us stakeholders will be on the same page. I challenged the Commission to do specific sensitization on how a winner emerges in an election. That the fact that your loyalist or your preferred candidate wins at your polling unit, at your ward, at your local government, at the state, does not mean he is going to be the next president, because there are thresholds that has to be met. Majority of valid vote cast, as well as 2/3 of valid votes in the entire country, which means 24 states.
Are you optimistic about 2023 election?
Very, 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 very.
What about you, Mr.
Certainly am.
And I hope that you are too, because it is very critical to our democracy, and we all need to do our best to ensure that we go out when you have the opportunity to. You must actually get the opportunity to get your PVC if you are over 18 years and you are in the country. Maybe sometime later, those who are outside of the country may be able to vote. But at this 2023 election, the law says you must be on the shores of Nigeria. I must sincerely thank both of you for coming. Very insightful conversations on this election. Thank you indeed, Mr. Jidojo and Mr. Oluwole Osaze-Uzi. But that's our show for tonight, everyone. I'll see you again on Sunday at 8 p.m. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. Bye-bye.